Okay, everyone, it is 5 past, and I know Matt has a lot of information to share, so I'm going to get this kicked off. I'm sure we're going to have a lot more people joining as we continue. My name is Kristen Giffen. I am Chief of Staff for Lift Aircraft, and we are so excited to have you all joining us here today. We're coming to you from Austin, Texas, which is our headquarters. And when Matt joins us in just a moment, you're going to see the beautiful 360 bridge behind him. This is where our offices are located, and actually where we flew our first public manned demonstration flight at South by Southwest. So this is a meaningful spot for us, and we're glad that you're at least able to virtually join us here. Wanted to just give you a little preview of how we're going to run this today. Matt does have a presentation, and as soon as he wraps up that presentation, he's going to ask or he's going to answer your questions. But what I would request that you do is that you just put all of your questions in that question and answer thread. And I'm going to be making a note of each of your questions, and then I will prompt Matt to answer those when we finish with the presentation portion. And I think with that, I am going to throw this to Matt Chasen, who is the founder and CEO of Lift Aircraft. Matt, if you want to join us and unmute and turn your video on so we can all see you, that would be great.
So I think I'm unmuted, but I think you have to enable that I can start video.
Got it. You should be able to now.
There we go.
Awesome.
All right. Hi, everyone. Awesome to be here. Excited to share with you guys a background on Lift Aircraft and some recent updates. Thanks, Kristen, for the introduction. Kristen's our wonderful Chief of Staff here at Lift Aircraft. So let's dive in. So the kind of long-term vision for Lift is to help solve what is already a horrific situation and just getting worse, by the day, which is the ground transportation issue in and around sort of major urban areas. The problem has reached epidemic proportions. The average American spends over 50 hours sitting in traffic each year. We've already, in some sense, taken to the skies in the form of helicopters, but due to the extremely high costs, loud operations, and questionable kind of safety, helicopters have really failed to reach widespread use for urban mobility. So when we look at this problem, we took really a first principles approach to designing a vehicle that we think is suited to this problem and can help us get to market quickly. So when you look at what ground congestion actually looks like and what people are doing in their cars every day, the vast majority, 85%, are taking trips less than 15 miles. So very short range, and 90% of commutes by car are just the driver, single occupant vehicles. So this really led us to think about an urban air mobility vehicle that is really designed for short range, single occupant use. And that led to our design for Hexa. So there you see me flying Hexa. Hexa is an all-electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that, I said, has single seat, is optimized for hover. So we don't have wings. We're not a transitioning eVTOL, but that makes us more efficient in hover and with more redundancies, more safety for that critical hover flight mode. The aircraft is semi-autonomous. You as the pilot on board do direct and guide the aircraft as the pilot in command. But the aircraft is stabilized, and flight control takes place leveraging semi-autonomous flight control computers. The vehicle, crucially, is already approved to fly under FAA Part 103 rules. That's ultralight class. So a key consideration in our development of this vehicle was that it conformed to Part 103 for ultralights. which does not require FAA type certification, nor does it require a pilot's license to fly. So I'll quickly run you through a few of Hexa's key safety features. I mentioned the flight control computer that is providing stabilization and really regulating the speed of our 18 motors and props that control all of the aspects of flight. So that flight controller is triply redundant in our system. It's a critical part of our safety configuration. You see with our design, we have an amphibious design. So we have 7 floats, 6 attached to legs and 1 in the center. I mentioned we have 18 independent motors with actually each has its own independent battery pack. So it's fault tolerant. Any failure in any one of the powertrain units, you lose one motor and 1/18 of your thrust, which is designed to be extremely redundant. We can lose up to 6 motors in theory, and after depends which 6, of course. But should the aircraft need ever lose control, it actually automatically deploys its own ballistic parachute system, which is mounted in the top center of the aircraft. So, 5 years into this business, we have the vehicle designed, developed, tested. Our go-to-market strategy is not to sell this aircraft to end users. Others are doing this in the space. We believe the best approach is to offer training and pay-per-flight operations in places that we can provide ground and flight control support. So we'll be launching lift vertiports where we've mapped the areas. We create safe geofence boundaries for you to fly. We can only allow flights during good weather conditions. We provide training on site, maintenance support on site, and dedicated instruction when you're learning to fly. Of course, our flight controllers can intervene in the event of an emergency that would require remote piloting assistance. So we think this is the right approach to the market, and ultimately it's going to allow many more people to experience flying Hexa than those that might be able to afford to own and maintain an aircraft. So, what's wonderful about our go-to-market strategy, I think, as well, is that we can launch in a location in a particular area with just one location, right? So under Part 103 rules, flights are limited to kind of entertainment, recreation, and sport purposes. And we love this go-to-market strategy because it allows us to launch the business without having to wait for extensive certification, and it allows us to launch with just one location. So, for example, this is a hypothetical location off of Pier San Francisco, Pier 27. From there, you can fly around Alcatraz or Treasure Island and have a wonderful recreational sightseeing experience and come back and land at the same location. Again, in this theoretical region, we expect to open multiple vertiports, multiple kind of smallish vertiports that allow then flights between those vertiports, all, of course, under Part 103. Another limitation is that you can fly over uncongested areas and outside of controlled airspace. So we're selecting our areas for, safe, uncongested flyover areas and outside of controlled airspace. And then kind of long-term strategy as we look at type certification for Hexa or a future version of Hexa, that will enable us to open vertiports where flight routes are then over congested areas and potentially in controlled airspace. But we see this as kind of the third step in our progression. So, what's the market for a vehicle like this and a service like this? The following are some kind of high level market estimates that folks in the industry have come up with. The whole market for urban air mobility. Morgan Stanley has written some reports. I think the latest estimate is that this will be around a $1 trillion market in 2040. When you start to distill what are the subsegments of that market, our go-to-market strategy, as I mentioned, first phase of the business is leveraging Part 103, which is entertainment and recreation. That's a big market in and of itself. Location-based entertainment is $12 billion. Military and defense markets have expressed a lot of interest in this new eVTOL industry. And Hexa, as a matter of fact, has been awarded several contracts by military, U.S. Air Force in particular, for different R&D and flight testing contracts. So we're really excited about the military and defense opportunities for Hexa. Also excited about emergency response. So under Part 103 ultralight regulations, ultralights are also allowed to be used by public agencies for emergency response. And this is without requiring FAA certification, and those pilots don't require pilot's licenses either. So we think because of the regulatory situation there, that emergency response is going to be one of the first markets for eVTOL, and we're well positioned to take advantage of that. So as I said, we launched Lyft about 5 years ago and have experienced some pretty remarkable progress. In those 5 years, we've developed and produced 17 aircraft, including launching low-rate serial production for Hexa with our partner, also based here in Texas, Carbon Aerospace. We've done over 1,300 test flights of Hexa, including the one you see pictured here, which is in the University of Texas Royal Memorial Stadium, which was a blast. We did that as a demonstration for the JROC, Joint Requirements Oversight Council of the DoD. We've raised over $18 million in funding so far, including over $4 million in R&D and test contracts with the U.S. Air Force, as I mentioned. Early on, we wanted to make sure that people were interested in flying this type of new eVTOL aircraft. And so we announced our intention to launch a tour and customer flights. And we've been just thrilled with the response. We have over 15,000 people on wait lists in 25 cities to be one of the first to experience flying Hexa. And we have multiple locations as well, our first vertiports in various stages of development. So I'll get now to some more recent updates. We've posted some of these updates to the news blog section of our website. So if you're not already subscribed, I recommend you subscribe to that. We post updates pretty frequently. As I mentioned, one of the many contracts we have with the DoD, with the Air Force, is to offer flight test as a service. And part of that is to train Air Force flight operations personnel in flying Hexa and operating the Hexa platform. So that means remotely piloting the aircraft, our ground station operator certification. And you can see here, this is a recent, I think it was the first time that an Air Force cadre has on their own operated an eVTOL vehicle. So it's a very exciting recent development. Also relatively recently, we shared with everyone, as I mentioned, Part 103 ultralight classification is a critical part of our go-to-market strategy, and part of qualification under Part 103 is that you have a technical standards committee do an inspection and a review for conformance to those ultralight standards. We've successfully completed that. We've actually posted this report out on our website. And, earlier this year, many of you may have seen Anderson Cooper, who obviously is a CNN news anchor, but also guest hosts, contributes to 60 Minutes, did a piece on the eVTOL industry. We were really honored to be included in that piece. And we were the only eVTOL aircraft that Anderson flew in and actually was able to pilot with, after having gone through our brief beginner training program. So I encourage you, if you haven't seen that, it was loads of fun. Anderson was a great sport. He was giggling on the radios the whole time. It was really fun to see. The flights that he did, by the way, are similar to what we'll launch with as our beginner flights. Now, in terms of our vertiport locations, we're really, really excited to have recently announced a partnership with an ownership group related with Charm Aviation. So Charm is one of the largest helicopter sightseeing and tour operators on the East Coast. They have operations out of New York, New Jersey, and Baltimore as well. One of the owners actually, his family manages or operates the Manhattan West 30th Street heliport. And so we're working closely with this group to launch a lift in the New York City area for flights over uncongested areas, which really comprise the Hudson and East Rivers and areas, but it's some of the most scenic areas in the country, and there's pretty extensive helicopter air tourism in the area. So we're excited to explore launching trials there as early as next year. We also recently signed an agreement to perform some flight demonstrations, proof of concept demonstrations with a sponsoring partner, Marubeni Corporation. Marubeni is one of the largest trading houses in Japan. Lots of different entities in Japan are very excited about bringing eVTOL to their country. Osaka is going to be the host of the World's Fair in 2025, and they've made it a priority to launch eVTOL operations in time for that World's Fair, in time for 2025. So they're working with us and others to do demonstrations, with the idea that this would lead to activations of operations, ahead of that 2025 timeframe. So we'll actually be in Osaka in Q1 of next year doing demonstrations. That'll be both private for their regulators, but also open to the public. So I want to shift gears here a little bit and share a little bit of our kind of financing background. As I mentioned, we've raised over 14 million in capital to date. Our first capital in was from institutional investors, from traditional early stage venture capital firms, a couple based here in Austin, wonderful firms, ATX Venture Partners, Capital Factory, some of the largest in Texas. We also have raised from Point Nine and Team Global, that are European-based firms, as well as Decisive Point Venture Partners is a venture firm that focuses on dual-use DoD and commercial companies. So really, really pleased, grateful for their support. I'm also a huge fan of crowdfunding. I was actually really privileged to be at the signing of the Jobs Act when President Obama signed the Jobs Act into law, which unlocked the ability for unaccredited investors to get in the game and to invest in early stage tech companies. So we were thrilled. We launched a Reg CF late last year that closed early this year. It was oversubscribed. We raised over 5 million from 2,500 investors through Start Engine. So that was really gratifying. In addition to our wonderful team here at Lyft, we also have a number of different advisors that we rely on for a lot of advice, a lot of guidance, in particular around testing and safety. A key advisor I'll point out here is Dr. Charlie Justice, who's the former head of aviation safety at NASA. We have a couple of folks from NASA, the president of the Light Aircraft Manufacturers Association, one of the early drone pioneers, the founder of DJI North America, Colin Gwynn, and then a couple of folks that were the founder and former CEO of iFly and the president and CEO of iFly, which is obviously a relevant experiential entertainment business. So just to kind of rehash what we've gone over, and then I'll sort of open it up for questions. Hopefully you guys have been posting questions to the chat. Hexa is designed specifically for short range use and single occupant use. We have completed our first stage of flight testing, which we call our beginner flight envelope. So we're really excited, very close to launching what we think will be the first paid flight operations for an eVTOL vehicle in the world. So of course, our key decision to focus on ultralight class, where there's no certification required, also no pilot's license required. Part of our mission and goal at Lyft is to let anyone experience kind of the joy and the thrill of flight, really for the first time in history, and leveraging autonomous flight technologies and the regulations that we're privileged to have here with Part 103. We're actually able to do this, we think, for the first time in history, really. Of course, to get where we are today has involved a lot of testing, and in particular, it's getting Hexa into production has been a heavy lift that we've accomplished. It's in hindsight, it's quite easy. We designed, built, and flew manned our first prototype in less than a year. And we've spent the last 4 years taking that and actually getting testing to the level of safety that we're targeting for this business, which is quite high, which is like, we want to be the safest ultralight that's ever been produced. In fact, we're targeting kind of more of a general aviation certified aircraft level of safety. And then to do that, of course, you have to get aircraft into production and test those production aircraft that ultimately your customers are going to be flying. So getting into production is its own challenge, but we're really, really pleased. We picked a great partner there. We're not trying to do everything ourselves, and that's been a great progress we've made. As I said, we've raised already over 18 million. We're now raising up to 10 in our latest Reg A+ stock offering, also through Start Engine. So this 10 million will be used to scale the business, scale production, and launch our first locations. So that is my presentation. I'd love to open it up now to answer some questions.
We've got some great ones. Thank you all for asking some really great questions. They're still coming in. So I'm going to start with, well, first I want to say it's really fun to see some familiar names out there. We absolutely love our customers. We love our investors, and I'm seeing some of your names come through, and I just want to stop and have a side conversation with you and see how you're doing. But really fun to see your names, and looking forward to getting more familiar with some of you that I don't recognize yet. The first and really obvious question, Matt, that we're getting from several people, different locations, most specifically Fort Lauderdale, Los Angeles. I'm looking at Chicago, Baltimore, New York. When are they going to be able to fly there?
Yeah, the only thing standing at this point in between us and launching our tour is really our final safety advisory board review. So we've, as I said, done over 1,300 test flights, including we spent sort of an additional year doing extensive flight testing under the direction of the United States Air Force, which, we couldn't turn down their offer to help us, flight test Hexa. And so that's extended a bit our I think, time frame, but it's been extremely time well spent, I would say. So we are planning now for our final pre-launch safety advisory board kind of review in January, and then that unlocks our ability to start flying, customers from our wait lists, and we expect to start that in Austin here with kind of beta flights, let more folks fly as we kind of dial in the customer experience. And then we will launch our, to take that tour on the road, and we'll be planning out, city by city when we'll be visiting. But the plan is to launch that in 2023. I know it's been, some people might be getting impatient. We appreciate everyone who is on our wait lists, but of course we're totally focused on your safety when you do fly, and you can never do too much testing. So again, we're very, very close to launching. I think when you look back, in 5 years, we've designed, developed, tested, and are in production with really the first eVTOL aircraft that will go to market. That's a remarkable, I think, it's one of the fastest development programs in history. We want everyone to fly as quickly as possible. But we're being diligent and cautious, from a safety standpoint. We want to make sure this is as safe as possible when you do get to fly. But hopefully this is we expect this to start in 2023.
Thank you. And then another kind of a common question that's coming up in this thread is relating to the FAA and regulations, and how likely is the FAA to crack down, as one person put it, on not requiring a pilot's license to fly, but then also, so that regulatory piece, but then also how is this going to work as far as airspace and regulating airspace and safety?
Yeah, those are all great questions. The FAA cracks down on things when existing regulations aren't working, right? When safety levels are not achieved. Part 103 has been a very successful regulation. The ultralight class was formally launched by the FAA back in the early 80s. We expect Hexa to be one of the safest, if not the safest, ultralights ever made. Which it's certainly going to be the most expensive development program, and probably the most expensive ultralight ever. Which we're thrilled to invest in such a sort of a sophisticated ultralight aircraft, but really it's the goal of ensuring it's one of the safest ultralights ever to launch. So look, if eVTOL and if ultralight eVTOLs do not maintain a high safety standard, there's always the risk that the FAA would come in, as they should, and put more regulations in. We don't think that's going to be necessary. We're, going through extensive, our own internal kind of certification process. And we've designed Hexa to many of the same standards as for type certified aircraft. But we just kind of technically don't require that FAA certification. So again, Part 103 has been around a long time. There's no discussion that we know of about changing it. This is obviously a new type of aircraft that was able to fit into that existing regulation. And as long as we maintain a good safety record, we don't see the FAA changing that.
Thank you. Another common question, it seems like we have a lot of pilots out there who are very familiar with ballistic parachutes and activation heights. And can you talk a little bit about, one of the questions is, what is the safety gap with the BRS being 300 feet for light aircraft? When does it become effective? Yeah.
That's a great question. So we get a lot of comments, especially on social media, asking, if Hexa can auto rotate, right? Auto rotation is a critical safety feature of traditional helicopters. And of course, multi-rotor electric aircraft cannot auto rotate. However, and for those of you who are not familiar, auto rotation is, when a helicopter might lose power to its main rotor, you basically engage a pretty steep descent and you sort of windmill your main rotor to basically become a gyrocopter at that point. And it allows you to attempt an emergency landing, right? So you can theoretically continue to fly, although at a pretty steep descent rate. We have a ballistic parachute as an alternative, right? And so this is a new and unique and patented ballistic parachute that's designed. It's actually designed and developed and produced by an Israeli company who has the patent on this, and it has many years of successful experience in all types and sizes of drones. This is the largest version of this parachute that has ever been deployed. And the wonderful thing about this is it's designed for these multi-rotors. And so it's designed to deploy and open as its deployment. Traditional ballistic parachutes on fixed wing aircraft, require hundreds of feet often to successfully deploy. This parachute is effective down to 10 to 12 meters above the ground. So that's 30 to 36, 40 feet above the ground. So that's absolutely remarkable. It's a key safety. We designed our whole aircraft really around this parachute. So we believe that most accidents that might occur below that effective altitude, the aircraft's designed to be crash worthy enough so that it mitigates the consequences of any incidents below that altitude. So, and then if the parachute's effective above that altitude, then we don't think there is a safety gap in our operations, right? That does not exist with traditional helicopters. If you're too low to achieve the airspeed you need to auto rotate, you're just too low. It's it's like the death zone for helicopters, and it's one of the reasons helicopters don't have a very good safety record.
Kind of along the safety lines, we have a question asking about the floats specifically. And the question is, will the vehicle stay upright with the individual buoyant feet, or is there a possibility it could flip like a duck? We certainly hope not. And this person says they're not familiar with the flotation side of Hexa. And what's the possibility of doing something similar for a flotation device as the autonomous parachute? So talking autonomy for the floats, and then just other possibilities for flotation and perhaps a raft, but just familiarizing even more with the flotation. It's something that we talk less about than other safety features, actually.
Yeah, yeah. Our floats are integral to our design, and they're rigid. They're fixed floats. They're not deployable floats like some helicopters have, or like sort of a life raft type deployment. And we did that for a number of reasons, but we have done float tests and tipping angle tests for our floats. And of course, we did this sort of theoretically as we were designing. the floats, some of you may have noticed our early prototypes of Hexa had 4 perimeter floats and 1 central float. And part of the reason for the design change to our production Hexa design, which has 6 perimeter floats in a radial configuration, a symmetric radial configuration, is to improve the stability on water. So, you know, we're not right now planning on doing normal operations, you know, from water, but given, you know, given our go-to-market strategy that's based on Part 103 and flying over uncongested areas, oftentimes, you know, near major metro areas, you have big bodies of water that are wonderful places to go do recreational flights. And so being able to do an emergency landing if necessary, or if the parachute deploys out over water, you don't want that vehicle to sink right when it lands. So that's the reason for the floats. We will be doing more, you know, more testing of our floats, you know, in the future to ensure that they're as stable and safe as possible. But yeah, that's a little more context around the floats.
Thanks, Matt. So another question about, let's see, we have a couple of questions about the weight limit for pilots. And is there a weight or a weight maximum, I should say, for pilots? And then kind of going hand in hand with that, talking about the limit of the flight time and the range, because certainly the weight of the pilot will have an impact on that, but there are other things that have an impact, like battery life and battery technology. Can you kind of speak to the first about the weight of the pilot and then transition into kind of battery technology and where we are today and where we're headed?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, it is the challenge for developing an eVTOL aircraft, right? Is batteries are heavy. You need to have enough payload for a human operator, a human pilot to be on board. And so that's a challenge for, you know, electric aircraft for sure. So obviously we have enough batteries on board to allow for basically a payload, an initial pilot weight of about 220 pounds. Now, you know, there's a trade-off. The heavier the pilot, the less redundancy you actually have in the powertrain. So I say we can lose, you know, up to 6 motors. Each motor produces around 80 pounds of thrust. So you want to maintain a really good thrust to weight ratio over, you know, 1.5, 1.6. Hexa is kind of overpowered in that sense. We have over 2-to-1 thrust to weight ratio with all 18 motors working. So, you know, we can and will expand that pilot weight as we do more testing and as we build, you know, statistical, you know, safety data into our powertrain operation. So right now we're launching with about 220 pounds as our max pilot weight, which is good reason for folks like me who are right on the borderline to, you know, to take it easy over the holidays if I want to keep flying. But we do see that expanding up to 250 pounds relatively soon. That's part of our envelope expansion program that is actually currently underway. I guess the second part of that question is about battery technology and flight time. So, you know, the heavier the pilot, the higher the payload, of course, the more power the motors are using. And we want to have that margin in there so you can lose multiple motors and still, you know, be able to return to home or emergency land. So, you know, current battery technology is somewhat limiting, right? And limits flight time. We also build in buffers, these significant buffers, you know, into our battery reserves. So we're targeting, you know, flight times for customers. And again, it'll vary significantly by the pilot's weight. But in around 10 to 12 minutes, we think will be typical flight times, which, you know, for our go-to-market under, recreation and sport flights under Part 103. This is actually plenty of time to have really an unbelievable sort of life-changing experience, self-piloting, an electric multi-rotor vehicle. And in that time, you can actually cover a lot of ground too. Hexa, has been tested in simulation to fly up to 90 miles an hour. Under Part 103, we're limited to 62 miles an hour. But going 60 plus miles an hour as the crow flies, it means that in 10 minutes you can go 10 miles. So that's quite a range. That's actually plenty of range to serve many early sort of urban air mobility routes, or to, for example, cross San Francisco Bay. So we think, again, we're focused on this hover optimized vehicle. We're not focused on long range. Other eVTOL developers have larger aircraft with wings. There's a trade-off, right? If you have wings, those wings are useless, dead weight essentially when you're trying to hover, and they're not very efficient when hovering. So we focused on let's focus on this hover mode of flight, make it as kind of safe as possible, and we'll get the range we get. But of course, us and others in the industry are very eager and excited for new battery breakthroughs that seem to be occurring. Solid state lithium battery technology, has a lot of promise and can increase energy density in these types of batteries by 3 times or more. And so there are breakthroughs that are going to work their way into kind of commercially available batteries that should extend the flight time and range, up to maybe 3 times what they are today. So we're really excited to see that happen. We didn't want to wait for battery technology. We wanted to launch a business that has a use case that is relevant for today's batteries, and that use case again is this recreation sport oriented go-to-market strategy.
More questions about batteries. We've got a question from Nick here. How is the power source of the batteries in Hexa charged? And does Lyft plan to utilize clean energy sources to regen at charging stations to help with, or assist with net zero? And then just another question that it kind of goes along the lines with the batteries about, are they removable? Does the entire aircraft have to be recharged? Just talk about how do the batteries get recharged, and what are our plans for lowering our footprint?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our battery system, we've chosen to use lithium polymer batteries, similar to batteries that are in phones and laptops. Because of the high power density. And a key safety feature in our design is that we have this distributed battery system. Each motor has its own dedicated battery. We're pretty unique in this regard. That has a number of advantages. Weight of power cabling is a significant weight expense, and we mitigate that a lot by having sort of very short distances between the batteries and the motors. We also decided very early on, in order to fit into the really strict weight limit of Part 103, we were going to charge the batteries off aircraft, right? So Hexa doesn't have a plug. You don't plug it in. Our ground crew actually can do a battery swap in like less than 5 minutes. So that's faster for operational turnaround of people's flights. And it's also safer. Actually, having 18 small batteries is much safer in the unlikely event of a battery issue, a thermal runaway. Everyone's seen this kind of cell phones that catch on fire. Very rare, but if it happens, we want it to be a very small battery pack and be away from the pilot. So as you can see in this video that's playing, these are small, relatively small battery packs, huge compared to like your cell phone, of course, but small relative to kind of central packs. And they're away from the pilot. So, the idea is there, you'll be able to do an emergency landing if there's a thermal runaway. And these batteries, a potential runaway, they tend to extinguish themselves, pretty quickly. So again, fast battery swaps on the ground. We save the weight of the charging equipment on board. So these are charged on, chargers on the ground. And so it's safer, and it saves weight for the vehicle.
Some questions are coming in about the vertiports and how close are we to launching our first vertiports, and also what size footprint do we need, and are we considering personal vertiports for the future?
Yeah, so we have a number of really exciting opportunities for our first vertiport locations. We are exploring and have actually received FAA approval for a vertiport site in Austin. We have announced, as I mentioned, a partner in New York City that we're working with to select a site and multiple sites in New York for consideration for our first vertiports as well. We also have several international, partners, some that we've announced, some that we haven't announced yet. The regulations internationally are vary country by country. Part 103 is a pretty unique thing that we have in the U.S. that allows for people to fly ultralight qualified aircraft without a license. So most of our development will be focused here in the U.S. I can't really say right now which site we think will be our first vertiport. What we intend to do to keep things kind of cost effective is we're gonna launch vertiports with kind of mobile infrastructure, with sort of pop up facilities that we can use to make sure that the communities in the areas that these vertiports are, the aircraft is extremely quiet compared to a helicopter, but there's a lot of people who don't know that yet. And a lot of areas that we might want to put a vertiport have, other things around them. And so we don't want to invest a huge amount in infrastructure until we get sites going and make sure communities, are accepting of these vehicles, taking off and landing near them. So stay tuned for more information on kind of which site may be our first to launch, but we have a number that are sort of in various stages of consideration and development.
We do have kind of I think a mixture of investors and customers who are on this call, people who are maybe both. There is a question that's out there that is, what is the relationship between lift aircraft and start engine?
Oh yeah, no, that's a good question. So start engine is an investment portal. When the Jobs Act was announced, it created this whole new industry for crowdfunding, Regulation CF and Regulation A+, and Reg A, and there's different types. Start engine, for companies that are, raising funds through Reg A and Reg CF, are required to do those. Well, not always required, but required to meet certain SEC regulations that are related to those. And so oftentimes companies that are raising funds this way will use a third-party portal, right, which serves to help to facilitate that investment, making sure everything's compliant, with SEC regulations and that sort of thing. So Start Engine is a site, it's a portal where investors can go and see multiple different companies that are doing fundraising, all different stages, all different industries. And we selected them. It's been a wonderful experience with our oversubscribed $5 million Reg CF that we closed out. Was very successful, and so it's a testament to selecting them again for our larger $10 million Reg A plus raise that's currently underway.
Thanks, Matt. Question about markets. Have we considered European launches? This person is saying they understand that in France, there's a movement to limit the use of commercial flights to distances that are greater than what could be reached by train in 2 hours, and that Lyft and or Hexa might have some appeal there.
Yeah, I saw that stuff just recently, the announcements in France, and I tend to agree, right? So a lot of eVTOL OEMs seem to be targeting this intercity, this kind of regional use case, of 50 to 150 miles. And many sort of claim to be capable of that sort of range. That is not that's not at all what we're targeting, as you can see. In fact, if and when bigger aircraft get certified, for commercial air taxi use, and I think it's going to be great. I hope one day to be able to fly between our hometown of Austin and nearby San Antonio or Houston, 50 and 150 miles away from Austin, respectively. That'd be great to do that. It'll be quicker by air, but that's going to get you from kind of like city center to city center. The problem that we're addressing long term with Hexa from an urban mobility standpoint is really the incredible congestion that's in and around our urban areas. So you could, does it make a lot of sense to, take an eVTOL flight from Austin to Houston if, you're stuck at a vertiport in the center of Houston, and then it takes another 45 minutes or an hour to get, to actually where you're going. So we're focused on, I call it that first and last mile, but really it's like the first and last 15 miles. And as you can tell, this model allows for more point-to-point, transportation. I think I neglected to answer a previous question, which is, will you ever have vertiports, like small vertiports at people's homes? We do think that we can allow certified sort of helipads or vertiports at people's homes, and when batteries allow for greater range and regulations allow for unmanned flights over congested areas of these types of aircraft, we do envision a world where you can open our app and summon an aircraft to you to pick you up that would deploy from a central location with fully charged batteries. It would get to you unmanned, you hop in, and you can then fly that to where you're going, where again, it's either a central location that can be charged again, or it's a smaller vertiport that doesn't have charging, but that the aircraft has enough range to get back to a place to do battery swaps and charging. So we think it'd be tough to do that with any meaningful range with today's battery technologies, but we think in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, the range will allow for more more point to point and more sort of residential flights.
So we just have a couple of minutes left and a ton of questions. So I just want to make sure everyone who hasn't had their questions answered, just make sure that you know that we will address these. We're going to be posting the recording of the webinar for people to review, but then also we do have your email addresses and we'll shoot you responses to your questions, and we'll try to respond to those also in maybe kind of a follow-up blog sort of posting so that you can see what other people were curious to know, and then we'll follow up so that you can review those. But I'm going to squeeze in 2 more if I can, and they kind of go hand in hand. They're really talking about just kind of looking into the future, which of course we can't tell, but we can at least kind of speculate from an informed perspective. Do you believe that eVTOLs with their safety and redundancies will take off or take over the helicopter market over time, is one question. And then another question is, you can just kind of transition into that, is that there are other companies who have closed their doors, other eVTOL companies who have closed their doors. And how are you feeling about the eVTOL industry as a whole? So for the first question about helicopters, and then as a whole.
Yeah, there's so many different types of helicopters that are out there. And helicopters, leveraging traditional fuels really have a place, in the mix, right? Many have really long ranges that eVTOL aircraft, may not be able to achieve. So I don't see helicopters going away. I see certain use cases for helicopters going away. The first will be aerial sightseeing tourism. There's, the average helicopter tour flight, and there's thousands and tens of thousands of these flights done, every year, every month in major tourist destination cities. And these flights are average, not much more than the flight time of Hexa, 10 to 13 to 15 minutes for many, right? You take off, you fly around Manhattan or San Francisco, although San Francisco has banned helicopters taking off and landing from the city. So I see that any short hop use for a helicopter is going to be really, really challenged to compete with hover optimized eVTOL vehicles. Another use that is emergency response. Police, fire, emergency medical. Oftentimes, that response is short range in nature and might only need to send a single person, a first responder, on scene. That's a wonderful new use case for eVTOLs. I don't see like the air ambulance industry going away by any stretch, right? What an air ambulance does is it brings the hospital to you, right? It brings a ton of equipment. It brings multiple interventional sort of emergency trained personnel to you. I think our model when it comes to emergency response is really to bring a single first responder on scene as quickly as possible, leveraging our single seat aircraft. But I think as batteries technology improves and range improves, eVTOL will continue to eat into traditional helicopters. But there's certain missions for helicopters like ultra heavy lift, or longer range that, it's going to be a very long time before, all electric aircraft can compete there.
And then just in general, in the last maybe minute, maybe 60 seconds in general about the eVTOL industry and
yeah. So
all of that. Yeah.
As many people on the call are probably aware, there are hundreds of startups that are, have various stages of, eVTOL aircraft development and some are large, transition designs that are for air taxi use. It's going to be a long road to certification. We think for those vehicles. The FAA has recently kind of changed course on how they're going to certify those. I think the FAA has been very supportive. The EASA in Europe, other regulators are very open to certification and in process. However, it's been pretty resounding that air taxi, use of eVTOL aircraft is going to have an extremely high safety standard, like commercial airliner levels of safety. And that's just going to take a very long time. I don't want to speculate on how long it's going to take, but that's going to take an extremely long time. It's taken, like a century, for commercial safety to get to where it is. I think what and in more uncertain economic times, it may make it harder for some of those companies to raise the funds needed, for certification and to get into operations, right? It's all along, our strategy has been, how can we get to market quickly build a profitable business around something that doesn't have these regulatory barriers, right? That's why we picked this. So kind of what's developing now, I think we'll see more eVTOL companies, unfortunately, shut down because they may not be able to raise funds, to pay for full certification programs. But again, that sort of plays into our original strategy for the business is to avoid that costly, lengthy certification, by leveraging existing regulations and a category that allows us to launch quickly. And I think being first to market, generating revenue, even if it's recreation and entertainment oriented, is gonna let us build out our location network, and it's in a capital efficient way. So
Wonderful. Please feel free to reach out to us folks separately. You can reach us at support@liftaircraft.com. A lot of you have lots of experience with that email address, and we try to turn around our responses very, very quickly. And certainly you can reach out to us individually. But we look forward to taking your questions on an ongoing basis, and we will get to the questions that you've asked already today. I'm so sorry that many of them went unanswered, but there's some great ones out there, and we will respond, we promise. Have a wonderful day, and we look forward to speaking with y'all soon.
yeah, thanks everyone. Can't wait to fly soon.